Good morning and welcome everyone to the June 14th meeting of the City of Topeka's Public Health and Safety Committee. Our main purpose today is to have a preliminary findings report from Karen Black of May 8th Consulting, who is working on our Change Our Culture of Property Maintenance initiative. I want to welcome everybody today. We've got the city manager, we've got the mayor, we've got the head of the Greater Topeka Partnership, a variety of city staff as well as partnership staff, and other guests. This is a really important program, and we're excited to be moving it. We have one quick item of business for the committee before we move into this presentation. So would first call the meeting to order and have my colleagues on the committee introduce themselves. Councilwoman.
Christina Valdivia Alcala, District 2.
Spencer Duncan, District 8.
And we have a message from Councilman Dobler, who is also on this committee, that he will have to miss. He has an emergency meeting this morning. Would entertain a motion to approve our April 25th minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any conversation? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, minutes are approved. Okay, moving into our primary agenda item. Wanted to let you know that this session, I think everyone knows that our Change of Culture of Property Maintenance program was approved by the council, I think in December, on a 10-0 vote, a massive challenge to literally change our culture of property maintenance in the community, primarily hoping that working toward everybody taking care of themselves and each other rather than needing the city to intervene at all, and internally to look at all of the interrelated parts, not only in our code compliance department, but the related forestry department, police, fire, and others that legal, to work together to do the best possible job we can do with our policies and the way they roll out in procedures, not only in relation to people in the community, but in relation to the next steps. Ideally, again, having a well-oiled machine that pushes it back so nobody even wants to be involved in that system, but we are treating people fairly and kindly, but firmly, and that as much as possible, we're rolling it back again so that we don't even need to be involved in the community because we've changed our culture. And I want to give Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala credit for coming up with that term. Things have really been working along. After the presentation, we'll give you just a quick nugget update of where some of the other pieces of the initiative are moving. And right now, I will hand off to Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala to introduce Ms. Black.
Thank you, Chair. Just real quickly, we had a couple of questions about how we came upon Karen Black and May 8 Consulting, and to put it in a nutshell, Googled her. But it was more than just Googling. What it was is it was Googling progressive, innovative code compliance property maintenance initiatives. And her name kept coming up, May 8 Consulting kept coming up, drilled into one of the presentations that she made, drilled into the PowerPoint that she had provided, spent quite a bit of time and a couple of days looking at that and was highly impressed. And so reached out to her and knew that Chair and this committee were going to need help in this vast approach that we're looking at with changing the culture internally and externally. So with that, I will say that Karen Black is the CEO of May 8 Consulting, a woman-owned social impact consulting firm. She also teaches at the University of Pennsylvania in the Urban Studies Department, and she is a senior research fellow at the Drexel University Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation. She is also co-founder of the Healthy Row House Project, an initiative to improve access to private capital for home improvement loans, leveraged $100 million in public and private capital. She has spent 12 years as a practicing civil rights attorney. She received her Bachelor of Arts from Williams College and a doctorate of law from UCLA. So we will turn it over now to Karen Black.
Thank you. It is great to be in Topeka. So thank you for inviting me. I would say the most important thing I just want to bring up in this first slide is that this is a mid-project report. Nothing has been decided, right? I have spent a lot of time on Zoom with Mike, okay, with a lot of people besides Mike too, but trying to understand how things are happening currently. So spoke to fire department, spoke to legal, and then the goal here today is right after this, we're gonna have a legal roundtable and we're gonna say, what changes could we make legally? What's feasible? What will have high impact? Meeting with code enforcement tomorrow. So this is not to give you a report of our findings and say, and here you have it, folks. This is, in fact, to say, look, we are really doing a deep dive, and this is what we think we found, and we would like to hear your perspective on it. Christina was kind enough to introduce me. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have been honored to be part of the revitalization of some neighborhoods that you could not recognize today, which I think is what Topeka wants. They want all the good stuff, all the positives, but just lifting up some of the condition and quality. When I came in, the councilwomen called me about this potential project, and the thing that was flagged immediately is they said, this is a 5-year project. And that was really exciting to me because it meant to me that they understood that this isn't something you do overnight. Too often I get called by cities and they say, what, okay, it's July 4th. We want to fix this problem by like September 1st. And we've got 4,000 vacants, so what do you think? And I think that that's not going to happen, right? And so when they came to me, they'd already met with a huge number of residents. They had goals for the project. And since that time, I've interviewed over 30 leaders in the city, many of you who are in this room today. We've analyzed a huge amount of data, some of which we had that gives us a clear picture, some of which, quite frankly, Topeka doesn't have, and I would love to have. Right today, I can't tell you how many vacants there are in the city or where they're located. We don't know yet. We talked to nonprofit partners. And now what we're doing is we want to share the preliminary findings, and then I think there's 13 meetings in 4 days, just brainstorming and trying to figure out what the best paths forward are. Before I get into the findings, I think it's really, really important to say that when you lift up property condition, you have amazing impact. And these are studies, some of which were done at University of Pennsylvania, where I teach, some other places, but basically, one study this year showed that when you repair one home, you can reduce crime on the block by 20%. That's powerful. That's really powerful. When you improve a home, you also improve the health of the people who are living in it, and even the health of the people who walk by it. Another University of Pennsylvania study shows that when you walk by a vacant house, a burned out shell, your blood pressure goes up. Even if you live in that neighborhood and walk by it every day, you fix that property, you have helped that person's health, right? It's important. Obviously, raising property values is something, and when you do that, you improve tax revenue for the city and the school district. But there's all these other benefits that I just don't want to lose track of when you do code enforcement right, when you offer programs to help people fix up properties. You stop abandonment, you stop vacant properties, you improve school performance because kids are in places where they can get their homework done. You revitalize neighborhood and you slow the decline of home ownership, which is important in a city like Topeka. So my deep dive is on how we enforce the code, because this city decided many decades ago that everyone deserves to live in safe, decent housing. It's in the law. But the law doesn't mean anything without enforcement. So the goal for any code enforcement is to gain compliance, create community stability and confidence, and safer, healthier places to live and work. And to do that, you want to do that with the least possible city intervention, as the councilperson said. So how do you do that? And some of the tools that have worked in other cities are to get people from that point of, I'm going to ignore you, this is my property and I will keep 14 cars on the front yard, that's my choice, to how much time do I have to comply? And that gold bubble is really important, which is, but I could use a little help, right? There are some people who are not negligent, they are not willful, and decide they just don't have the money to fix it up. And the last thing you want to do is cause displacement or harm. I also want to just remind us, it took decades to get here, right? If you look at that old redlining map of Topeka and you see where the federal government and the lenders basically said, ignore these neighborhoods, do not invest in them, they are not safe, they are not worthy, and you look where most of the buildings and properties are that we are saying are deteriorated or vacant. There is a parallel there. We aren't going to solve this overnight because it didn't happen overnight. So the context of all of this is we want code enforcement to be efficient, right? That means educating owners ahead of time of the standards to be met. No one should be surprised, right, when they get a code notice. They should know what's expected of them. To target the really bad actors who have the capacity. To focus on health and safety, that's why we're here. To coordinate all government departments so you can work more effectively. To collect and track data, which the city does through MyGov and other things, but there are ways to combine data, there are ways to have more data that could be helpful, and to use the courts when you need to hold owners accountable. It's not working. Can you just click to the next one and I will? But you also need to be equitable. Different types of owners need to be treated differently. Sometimes an image that came up again and again was the 80-year-old on an oxygen tank who's standing in municipal court because they've been charged with a misdemeanor crime, right? Because they didn't keep up their property. That's very different from the LLC investor who owns 450 properties and has 220 violations. To involve meaningful community partnerships, incredibly important, prevent displacement, and limit use of criminal fines and penalties, because our municipal court, what they can do is they can put a misdemeanor on someone's record, which means they may not be able to get into a school or get a job. We have to be very, very careful about that. Topeka's doing many things right, and I just want to start there, right? The focus is on compliance, not punishment. I can't tell you how many cities I've walked into that say, we got that guy. We got him. He didn't know what hit him. Well, if he didn't know what hit him, you're doing something wrong. That's not the point. You abate quickly and efficiently. I did not ever hear Mike kind of shrug and say, yeah, whatever, right? This has to be dealt with. How do you deal with it? Code is completing 18,000 inspections per year, right? That's a huge number, right? They're getting out there. And then putting the information in MyGov, you have a complaint system, See, Click, Fix, which allows residents to let their complaints be known. You have both civil, the administrative hearing process, and the municipal court process, and you've got a home repair grant program funded by the Federal Home Loan Bank that is specifically for people with code violations. That's huge. So let's look at the data that we've seen so far. So in context, Topeka has about 60,000 housing units. You have 22,000 roughly properties with code enforcement cases. Now, they aren't all residential, but the majority are residential. That's a lot, right? So let's just keep that in our minds. 100 of the total properties have more than 15 cases. So you've got these chronic violators, right? And these are the properties that the minute they get fixed up, there's another batch of junk that's going into the front yard. When you look at the owners, that's also really interesting. There are almost 16,000 owners with cases. Now, when I say cases, that means not that they have a set of complaints filed on the same day. It may be several different things that were done, but this is a case that would then go on to administrative court or municipal court. Of the owners, 28% of those owners with cases are LLCs, which means those owners are sophisticated enough that they went and filed to become a limited liability corporation and to protect their own assets. This is a business. They have made a choice. This is not a little old lady. 9 out of 10 owners with the most cases are LLCs. If Topeka had a system where they were able to get the top 30 owners, the owners with the most cases with violations, to just obey the law, 10% of those code cases would go away tomorrow. Right? So municipal court is seeing the same owners over and over and over and over. It takes about 3 inspections per case of those 18,000 inspections annually. The average time between the complaint and inspection is 3 calendar days. And the average time between complaint and voluntary compliance is about 43 days. But we're still kind of, Mike and I were just talking about this, what is voluntary compliance? And the database doesn't really allow us to get at it as well as we would like to. Voluntary compliance may not mean that the owner actually voluntarily did something. It may mean that they were sent to municipal court. And so that's a place where we have data we want. The database makes it difficult to get it. And so it's something that we're trying to refine and understand better. If you look at the types of violations that they're being cited for, I don't think this will be a surprise. 30% weeds, 33% sanitation, which is junk and anything in the yards. Housing violations are the ones going to municipal court. What may be more surprising is that 78%, so almost 80% of the cases are department initiated. So this is proactive rather than reactive. These are not complaints from residents. And about 22% are initiated by either council people or other departments. The fire department says you better look at this. Police department says you better look at this. Or the public. This is very unusual, right, compared to the other cities I've worked in, which it's primarily complaint-based. The other thing that's unusual is about 77% of inspections are exterior only, which is how you get to 18,000, because you can drive, park, look, go on to the next one. We aren't looking at as many interiors. So if tenants are living in unsafe and substandard conditions, and as I said, I performed about 30 interviews and every person said that they believe that to be the case, those tenants are not complaining at a level that they are in other cities. And the question is why? The city conducted about 8,000 abatements. All of this data, I should have said from the start, is from 2015 to 2021. And thank you to everyone who made this data available. The city spent about $2.2 million on abatements and recovered about $1.4 million through collections, through tax sales. 17% of those properties that received an abatement received more than one. Those repeat offenders, those chronic violators. So the owner of 21 properties, who will remain nameless, at least for this public meeting, received 105 sanitation abatements and didn't pay them back, just to. Once someone is cited and they fail to comply, they are typically sent to municipal court, which, as I said, is a criminal court. 50% of the time, when they appear in court, they appear for an arraignment and they are given a 60-day continuance. They are given up to 6 60-day continuances in court. And the premise is that the court is taking them on their word that they're going to do something, that they're going to fix something. But every time they come back to appear in court and get a continuance, the inspectors have to go re-inspect to show that that condition still exists. So a huge amount of resources, about equal number of inspections and re-inspections are taking place, right? Those 18,000. And so it's really very resource intensive for the city. Out of all the LLCs and individual owners who went to court between 2015 and 2021, only 2 have been found guilty. And they were outliers and their cases were outrageous. So there's this look at, and right after this, we're going to go talk to the judges and everyone else. How do you use the courts to gain compliance most effectively? Give people a reasonable amount of time, but not just keep continuing it so the code has to keep proving that those conditions exist over and over and over. The administrative hearing is the civil process. So an administrative hearing judge, which right now is also a municipal court judge, will hear cases, primarily 2 types. The biggest is unsafe structures that are being potentially considered for demolition. That makes up about 60% of their docket. The other thing is that if an owner wants to appeal the fact that due process was violated, that the complaint just wasn't valid, they can also appeal it to this body. They hear about 90 cases with about 178 hearings per year. And where they order demolition, 63% of those homes end up being demolished by the city, 27% are demolished by the owner, and about 9% are rehabilitated. If I let Mike talk now, which I won't, I'll say, don't say it, Mike. He will tell me that before the administrative hearing judge orders demolition, a lot of people rehabilitate their property just because of the threat. I just didn't have that data, right? So this is once the administrative hearing judge says, yep, we're gonna demolish, what happens? Okay, so what do we know so far? 1, property maintenance is a significant priority in the city. It is not always, by the way. I walk into cities and they say, yeah, no, we got bigger fish to fry. Everyone I spoke to said this is critical. We aren't able to quantify the challenge yet in a way that I think would have allowed me to do this in 2 slides and say, okay, here are the vacant properties. Here's a map of where they are. Here are the deteriorated properties. This is what the key issues are. But more data could allow us to do it in the future if we share data between departments and start building up that information. And it'll help to target not just owners, but properties, and give different treatment to different neighborhoods. Enforcement currently is being done, but it's a slow process that eats up resources and quite frankly makes neighbors feel like the city isn't doing anything because it's just taking too long between the complaint or the condition and a resolution. The exterior condition of residential properties is the de facto priority. I had to throw in that legal term. I just want to remind everyone I'm a lawyer. No. It is the priority of this city because that's what 80% of the cases are. It's not that you are going into rental units and saying, wait, the ceiling is about to collapse. Wait, the toilet is leaking. The electrical has wiring hanging down and this landlord is charging $450 or $800 a month. And we have to get in response to a tenant complaint. And then currently, the municipal court system treats all owners the same. The whole system is that so the 80-year-old with an oxygen tank goes through the same process as the LLC owner with 400 properties. And so when we're looking at recommendations, part of it is how do you separate them? So here are the areas that we're talking about with all these various groups and hopefully all of you over the next 4 days. First, what if we adopted alternative code enforcement paths? So if an owner is cited and they have an opportunity to basically fill out a form that says, I have a medical or financial hardship, I can't fix it. It's not, I'm a homeowner, I don't want to live like this, but I can't paint my house because I don't have enough money to heat my house. They go through a different process. Large owners, chronic violators go through a very different process. And so it allows you to get much harder, much faster on those who have the capacity and are willfully violating the law, and have a social worker, a navigator, someone who can help the homeowner who just doesn't have the resources. They have completely different conditions, let's treat them differently. Providing protections to vulnerable tenants is the priority in most cities I work in. Making sure that they have a warm, safe place to live. Yet tenants aren't coming forward. So what can we do to change that dynamic? Not to create complaints, but to make sure that they feel comfortable coming to the city and saying, I have a complaint, and that they won't face retaliatory eviction, they won't be displaced. Particularly when the most vulnerable feel like any shelter is better than no shelter. To shorten those enforcement timeframes, right? Because now suddenly you don't have to give continuances to the LLCs because you already know that they own 14 properties, 13 of them have code violations, and you say, well, if you gotta sell a couple to quickly get the others in line, you can do that. Use public dollars for abatement strategically. The city does an extraordinary job of going in, fixing up, but to go to the same property 100 times probably does not make sense, I would argue. Use that educational material. I have a whole bunch of ideas, but the basic idea is that every owner should know what they have to do, why it's good for the neighborhood, what the reason is, and how to find help. Expand the partnership with the county around tax sales to get these properties reactivated, around the nonprofits who are doing just amazing work to help repair homes or do infill. And then we had this amazing roundtable last night with some young developers who want to go in, buy houses for cheap, put $45,000 in them, fix them up, and rent them out. How do we welcome that investment? How do we make that feasible in as many neighborhoods as possible? Okay, that's what we know so far. Over the next 3 days, we are meeting with as many folks as possible to say, first of all, does this make sense? Which I guess is my first question to you. And what do you see as really critical if the city is going to change its response in a really positive way to lift up the condition of properties? And can I turn it over to Karen and Christina to take it from here?
You zipped through that, lady.
I did. You told me to zip, so I zipped.
So we've got more time than we thought we would have. Thank you so much, Karen, for being here and for this presentation. With that, just so everyone knows, she is on the schedule for the council meeting tonight, but it will be a condensed presentation from what we had today. So you don't need to come back unless you want to. But we also have scheduled tomorrow evening at the Celtic Fox from 6 to 8, a public meet and greet for any of you to come back, and for anybody in the community that would like to meet her, that has some data or information that would be valuable to her as she continues her work, or has some strategies that they thought would work that they would like to share with her. So feel free to come back tomorrow evening and to pass the word. We do have time today, though we actually have about 30 minutes, and so if people have some of those very thoughts, some data that you wondered if she had for sure, or some leads for her on how to explore information that she could use, some strategies that you are aware of that have been discussed that you want to make sure she's got her pen and her pad ready. And so we would love to hear from you. Got in the back first, Steve, come up to the mic, please, so everybody can hear you and see you. And then Matt, you're next.
Morning. I'm Steve Vogel. I'm the president of the Shawnee County Landlords Association. I've got two questions. The first one is, can we get a copy of that slide thing that I think some of you have a paper copy, don't you?
Yeah, did we bring any print copies, Liz?
Oh, I was thinking I saw some of you. If you didn't, that's okay. Okay, I'll get to my second question. I think most of you council members, I know Mike is, and I think I gave it to Karen last night, it's called the Chuck Kitt memo. Okay, that is the statistics that he has are, I want to say, significantly different than the ones that you have. And I'm talking specifically about, you said, if I believe 28% of the complaints come about LLCs? Okay, now, because the Chuck Kitt memo, these are the cases that actually went before the court docket. And that's different than what you have, is that correct?
That is correct, and for a different time frame. Steve is talking about a memo that was written in 2017 by a former prosecutor looking at this issue, and so we were able to get the actual court information as well as the city data out of MyGov. Let me just caution everyone that every piece of data has its difficulties. And in this, we literally had to search for LLC, limited partnership, some words. There is no field to say this is a professional investor, but this was the closest we could get.
I think it'd be pretty safe to say that in probably almost all the cases that if it's an LLC, it's an investment property. But I think that if you could assume that the data from 2017 is not significantly different than the data from 2022, and Mike, you could probably speak to that, then I would say if 28% of the complaints were about landlords, we'll say, but only, say, 5 to 10% of the cases that got to the court docket were about landlords, then I think it would be safe to say that by and large, landlords take care of their problems. I mean, would you agree or disagree with that?
That's interesting. So one of the municipal court judges that I'm meeting with later today estimated that 85% of the people who are coming before him in court are the individual owners who own one property, who are homeowners and are poor. So that would support what you're saying. We don't know that, though. The problem is we, right now, don't ask an owner, can you pay to do this? Do you have a financial hardship? We just don't have those records. So what you saw here is the data that is quantitative, and I think in the memo and with the judge, they have a lot of qualitative knowledge, and so they can share that. I just wanted a baseline of what we can actually show based on the data we collect. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's just so important. I mean, I advocate for landlords. So, I mean, when I saw that statistic, I thought, man, that really got my attention. But I think it's really important to know, because I had another landlord tell me, when you look at this Chuck Kitt memo, that tells you that by and large, landlords take care of their problems. Because I think it would also be pretty safe to assume that when a landlord gets a complaint and a letter from the city about a code compliance violation, that it was probably caused by the tenant.
We don't have that at all. We can't tell who was responsible. So there's two ways to look at this. One is, wait a second, so most of the municipal court's time is being taken up with people who are homeowners, who have potential criminal charges filed against them? That's something to look at. And the other thing that flagged for me is we have a lot of landlords and LLCs, as you say, who have code violations, but they're fixing them. And the other thing I would love to see is how much city resources are used to get them to the point between knowing there's a complaint and fixing the complaint. And obviously, that's different, as you say, Steve, if the
Yeah.
tenant is responsible or if the owner is responsible.
I'm going to back that up, because what I said probably really wasn't true. If it's something like trash in the yard or something like that, that's obviously tenant-caused problem. If it's peeling paint or the gutter's falling off or the window's broken, that would be absolutely the owner's or landlord's responsibility.
So the data doesn't allow us to see that.
I
You see
see.
it out there, but we can't prove it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I'll just make a comment to Steve's point, and I think, I won't speak for everybody, obviously, but I do think the perspective we look at this is two things can be true. And I think we can look at it and say the majority of landlords in Topeka are responsible. We have a problem of a core group of bad actors, though, who are creating a large percentage of problems. So as we parse through it, our goal is to make sure that we're, as Karen said earlier, treating everyone differently and recognizing the good actors make up a majority, but we've got this core group we've got to go after,
Exactly.
if you will. Yeah.
I agree 100%. And I've always said, anybody who's ever been around me very much will say, there are some really, really bad landlords in Topeka. And I don't want to try to gloss over that or anything. So, yeah, I don't want to try to hide that. I was just saying that, for the most part, I think landlords do a pretty good job.
Yep.
So,
Councilwoman?
Thank you for coming up, Mr. Vogel, and I would agree. I think that and I also agree with what Councilperson Duncan is saying, is that by and large, there should be a great sense of pride in those landlords that are as conscientious as you are and those that we talked with last night. And they have every right to be defended. And I think you do a good job of that.
no,
I
thank
would
you.
also state that I agree highly with, Councilman Duncan, is that what we are seeing is a small percentage of bad actors. And I'm glad that you're not defending them.
No.
Because I think you want for the city what we all want, right? That's safe,
Exactly.
affordable housing. And that is what we aspire to, and that's what we're working towards. And I hope that we can keep the doors of communication open with you. And
Yeah.
I thank you for coming last
Well,
night as
thank you,
well.
yeah. I think there's probably pretty broad agreement on those points, so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
City Manager?
So with all your work with communities and stuff across the country, do any of those communities have land banks? And do they utilize their land banks in cooperation with property maintenance? And how's that work in some of these communities?
Yes, so there are almost 400 land banks around the country. I have worked with several of them, many of them actually, more than several. And in that case, they are designed to reactivate vacant properties for the most part. So a large number of the properties that every land bank has is tax delinquent. The land bank has the power to get it very cheaply or for free typically, and then offer it to an owner that has the capacity to fix it up, the will to fix it up, and hopefully actually an agreement promising to fix it up for a specific use like affordable housing. There are some locations, particularly in New York, where even if they aren't tax delinquent, the land bank can acquire the property and they can be put at tax sale just for code violations. So a daily code violation of $200, they refuse to fix it up. Those add up over time until that value exceeds the value of the house, and they are put at tax sale. That is far more controversial, but it is a common practice in New York. For all of them, the goal is to create a transfer of ownership and to get them back into the market. So I know of examples of land banks that work incredibly poorly and subjectively, and get the properties to people with political connections or, you know, a handful. I also know land banks that have been a godsend, have been just amazing, and are efficient and effective and objective, and turn property over and have tremendously improved neighborhoods as a result. So we know a great deal about land banks. I've got probably 30 studies at this point as to what works. I've been working with the Center for Community Progress, which is the national nonprofit working with land banks and advising some of them. So we have a good idea of what works in a land bank and what you need to avoid, or else you just really aren't solving the issue. Did that answer your question?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, good.
And so then my follow-up question is, what you know of Topeka so far, could we benefit from a land bank?
I would like to defer my answer for 3 more days. You know,
In 3 days, I'll hit you up with
yeah, I mean, I drove around. There are certainly vacant properties that, if they were reactivated, would make a huge difference in the neighborhoods. I have been working with Hannah and others to get the data from the county so we could actually see how many are tax delinquent. I've interviewed the county about their tax sale process and how they choose properties to go to tax sale and then reactivate. So I need all that information before I can give you any kind of an answer. It's just a little premature.
3 days.
3 days.
Oh, did I just say, sure. Oh, then Matt.
Yeah, and Matt, we've got somebody online.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to say that with that driving tour that we had yesterday, it was at a very fast rate, but we did it nonetheless in 2 hours.
Good morning, Matt Pavarnik with the Greater Topeka Partnership. So I have a comment, compliment, and a question. First of all, the comment is in 2017, our community went through a strategic planning process, really a holistic community-wide economic development process, and had consultants from Atlanta that came in and spent a lot of time comparing Topeka to other cities that were of similar size. And one of the things in their community assessment is the very first thing is that they told a few stories. And the number one story in 2017, as we were heading into 18, is that the lowest hanging fruit, there's a lot of big things that we need to accomplish in the community, but the lowest hanging fruit that Topeka should address and can address is aesthetics. The way that our community looks, that is in neighborhoods, in corridors, commercial properties, gateways into the community. So that leads me into the compliment. The compliment is, first and foremost, Karen, thank you, and Mike and Hannah. This mid-course report, I can tell we're going to learn a lot through this process, and I appreciate that this is mid-course and that there's a lot more to uncover and discover. The second compliment goes to Councilwoman Hiller and Valdivia Alcala for really having a bias to action. A lot of times we can tend to sit around and we can talk about stuff and yell at each other, but sometimes the bias to action really just gets us. And having you here, that is that bias to action. And so I have a feeling that at the end of this, we're going to have some very clear and cut action items that if we are dedicated enough and disciplined enough to implement, that we can make significant progress. And then my question is one of the things that surprised me the most was the percentage of city discovery for code violations to citizen. And it seems to me that if a citizen, I don't know if we tell the property owner who actually made the complaint, but it seems to me that if a citizen or a homeowner were to find out that it was their neighbors that had issues as opposed to the city, that would actually be even maybe more healthy. And so why is our percentage of citizens that are making complaints so low?
I want to understand that better. So There is See-Click-Fix, which does allow you to post an anonymous complaint, though some of the people I interviewed weren't sure it was really anonymous. I also heard from nonprofits who work with tenants to say that their greatest fear is retaliation. And interestingly, some neighborhood leaders said that even neighbors fear retaliation from other neighbors.
Wow.
So why that is the case is something we really need to dig into a little bit and to make sure that we've offered them the protections where they can feel comfortable or allow code to go into a place. One of the things I had mentioned yesterday is that, in a lot of cities, tenants who have been living in unsafe and terrible conditions finally get out, and just before they leave, they call the city because they don't want anyone else to go through what they went through, right? I'll fix that next week, which ends up being 2 years and nothing gets done. And so following up on those cases and figuring out, can we somehow strengthen the protection of the tenant who does complain? Because you have an awful lot of rental that's a single family house. So when code shows up and said, we had a complaint that this house is unsafe, who could that be who made the complaint, right? It's much easier to hide when you have a large multifamily and one tenant out of 300 made a complaint. So we need to get that and understand it, and education of tenants is part of it, and legal protection of tenants, and we're going to be talking about a lot about that over the next 3 days.
Part of that's changing our culture.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's right. We have Chris Palmer on Zoom. Can you bring Chris on?
Hello, thank you, council members, and also I enjoyed my time talking to the professor when we met over Zoom, and the one thing I would just caution us all against, and it's not just this, it's just sometimes things in life, there's angels and devils, and it does make life easy when it's the poor, disabled homeowner. And the other side that you would discipline would be the, I think you referred to it as the LLCs, the big corporations that own 50 units or so, and well, they could just sell a few and fix this. Those are both outliers. Everything else is in the middle. And I got interested when you talked about the young developers who wanted to buy these properties cheap and then put like $40,000 in. Yeah, half the people at that table are your future slumlords. Not because they want to be, but because they get excited, they see how cheaply they can buy something, and they can put a little investment into it. But the house is still 120 years old, and the boiler's still going to go out, and the roof needs to be replaced in 3 years. And so I think a lot of quote unquote slumlords don't start out as that to be that, or they make a lot of money. They don't do things because they don't have the money to do them, because they're also charging lower rents, because it's a vicious cycle. I'm glad that Steve spoke up, and I've known him for years, and I think he does a good job advocating for most landlords. I think most landlords do what is needed to get done. And I think sometimes the people that ignore the notices from code aren't just the poor disabled people who can't afford to fix things and it's mean old government. It's just that life gets in the way. And you get a letter in the mail, even if it's certified, oh gosh, I need to do that. And then you're worried about something else in your life and you forget about it. So I would just caution all of us that all of our lives would be much more simple if everyone was an angel or a devil. So I actually, I guess, I don't know if it's few people, but I don't think we need to turn everything on its head in the code compliance department. I think code does an excellent job in Topeka, and I think the See-Click-Fix is a wonderful addition to the tools that citizens can use. I've talked to people and they complain, well, this pothole's never been fixed, and look how long it's been. Well, have you ever told anybody about it? Well, I mean, they should see it. You know how many thousands of miles we have of roads in this city? And my guess is if you tell them about it, it'll be fixed. And it was. And then, I mean, I have examples where I've gone through some of our properties. We have about 190 units. And I did a C-click fix because there was overgrown brush or shrubbery covering, partially covering a stop sign. And so I said, hey, Jerry, look what I did. I turned this into the city out on, somewhere in southeast Topeka. And I told him about the next day. And he drove by, he said, there's nothing covering that. It's because they'd already done it. They already fixed it. And I showed him a picture that I took. So I think promotion of that tool is a great thing. I do understand if, let's say, if you'd had a conversation with your neighbor about something that you didn't like and was a code violation, and then anonymously in a week they have a code violation, they're probably going to figure out who did it and who turned them in, and that's probably going to ruin the relationship. But again, I'm talking too long, but I thank the council for hiring you, and Google search or not, it was a good search, and that's what it's there for. And I think that you're a winner. I think that you are excellent for us. But I would just stress that we are starting from a position of strength, and we need to strengthen what we're doing and the tools we have. I think everyone, definitely everyone here, is looking for the power of good to do better, and not that this is a dying patient and we need to get on to the next patient. So that was probably a horrible analogy, sorry. But anyway, angels and demons, watch out for it, that's all.
Thanks, Chris. Two quick things. One, just so you know, when we talked about the enforcement paths, there were 3. I just only talked about 2. So there was hardship, there was standard, and then there were chronic violators. So we do recognize that, there are a lot of folks who have 2 properties, 3 properties, 4 properties, no financial hardship, or even just 1 property and no financial hardship. And thank you for the kind words. And the other thing I just want to say is that I've now, I think, spoken to every city department that has a role to play in this, and every department said, we want to make this more effective, more efficient. Like, it was great. There was no defensiveness. It wasn't like, wait, are you saying we're doing nothing right? We've got to start from scratch? Because you're doing a lot right. It really is about, do you need more tools? Do you need to use the tools you have more effectively? How do you get the neighborhoods involved, the nonprofits involved, do more education? It really is about getting the results with fewer city resources in less time, and to do it in a way that will lift up properties at scale, right? Not just a few, but everything in the city.
Councilwoman.
Thank you, Chair. I would just do a little bit of pushback on that commentary in that I don't think that there is any nuances of black and white in what we're talking about. I think that there's no devils or angels in here. I think that what we're looking at is nuance, complexity, and this whole initiative is about multiple turning wheels at different stages and different levels. I think that Ms. Black did articulate everything that the city was doing right, and it's not about turning everything on its head. We understand that changes need to be made. I think we understand that on very many levels. We understand that the cultural shift needs to happen in neighborhoods, in communities, as well as within the city. And I count myself as one of those people. So I would say that one thing that can happen across all municipalities, state governments, et cetera, is where we have our own bubble mentality, which is very easy to come into. I have to get out of my bubble to start looking at things in a different way, and I try to practice that as much as I can. So I think that that's what we're really talking about. It's not, dismantling the entire system and starting from zero. That, to me, is a very naive, way to look at things. So I think that what we're doing is thoughtful in approach. It's an intentional, it is very deliberate, and as Ms. Black stated, this is a midpoint report. So, thank you, Chair.
Pat?
Patrick DeLapp. One thing, and I'm gonna be quick about this, I do think we should have equal enforcement, and we do not. We should inspect the whole city with the same scope and frequency throughout. We don't. We've got too many people, former city employees are exempt from it. We've got big wheels, which, example, 1600 Southwest Harrison, 1601 Harrison, that's a school the city of Topeka used to own. It was ordered to be pushed over back in 2013, 2014. It's still there. It never gets rode up. As you leave the parking lot right now, southeast corner, take a look at that building brick. Grass is waist high. That has not been written up yet. When they ride it up, they put a flag in the grass, don't they, Mike?
In every single grass case we have, yes.
Yes. Take a look. I don't see it over there. Those are the equal enforcements we should be doing, not just, oh, we've got a little note here, we can't do this, or we're not concentrating in this area, we're just concentrating in this area right now. I would want that changed. Thank you.
Thanks. Other pieces of information, questions, strategies you want to make sure Karen is exploring? Got a lot of Karens here.
I had one, but I didn't want to take up anyone else's time if there was anyone else. But if we talk a lot, rightfully so, we have about the exterior issues. Obviously, I think we know there's a lot of interior issues, but because of the law, the Constitution, all those things, we can't just go into those. I'm not asking you to lay it all out now, but I mean, will part of the discussion you have with staff and legal be about, you've sort of touched on it, how we can better get into some of those interiors? But more importantly, I would like to talk a little about more, because it is an issue. I live in a place, I'm afraid it's literally falling apart. I'm afraid to make the call because the truth is I'm going to be evicted. And when I show up to court, they're going to have an attorney who's evicted 1,000 people, and I can't afford representation. And 9 times out of 10, that person ends up getting evicted. So, I mean, I am interested in best practices or models we can look at to, that's really no fault of our staff, but it's clearly a problem in the end for that person, how we address that problem.
So at 10:15, when I leave here, I'm going to go spend 2 hours in a room with only lawyers. I know you're jealous. And we're going to discuss those issues because other cities do offer different protections, but many of them aren't under Kansas law, right? So what state law allows has to be our baseline, and a tenant has to give consent for code to walk in, right? And that's not true in some other places, but it's definitely true here, so that's the base. In other cities, the courts have the ability to say to a bad landlord, and we all know they exist, you will not collect rent. We're going to hold it in escrow until you make these repairs. Maybe you would be surprised, maybe you would not be surprised, but boy, does that get action. You've just taken their income stream off. You've just said, this is now an illegal unit where you don't get to collect rent from your tenant until you make these changes. And at the end of the process, the tenant is rarely evicted because they've already had to make the changes. And the court is aware of that person, and it's an ability for that tenant now to go back to the court and say, wait, they evicted me 2 weeks later, right? And they can take action. Can you do that here? Well, that's what we're exploring. We're looking at a number of things. The existing tools, can the enforcement be shifted, be changed? Because at the end of the day, the inspectors are working their butts off, and they will go into these houses and they will check a checklist off and see if they're safe, and then they will tell the owner what they have to fix or what the tenant has to do, because the tenant has responsibilities. But you have to have some comfort in involving the city. And without that, it means that a lot of vulnerable tenants are literally living in dangerous, dilapidated conditions. And that's not what the city wants. And it's not what the law says that those tenants should have.
Thank you.
One more, Steve, then we're going to wrap up.
I'll say, Councilman Duncan, I thought we were going to be about done, but I think you might have started a whole nother conversation. There is actually, in the Topeka Housing Study, which was completed 2 years ago, there is an item, a high priority item, to make mandatory interior inspections, and a asterisk on that is that would require a change to state law. And I just want to say, I very, very strongly oppose a mandatory involuntary interior inspection for a number of reasons. Probably one of the main ones is I believe it violates the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which is a warrantless search. But I think most of the time, if you knocked on, say, a tenant's door and said, you know, we're from the city, we want to inspect, probably most of them would allow you to do that. But there's probably going to be a pretty significant number that, I mean, they might greet you at the door with a gun. I mean, they don't want you to come inside. And I guess as another point that I've heard Chris Palmer make several times, that really bad tenants and really bad landlords have a way of finding each other. And there are, I want to say, probably hundreds, if not thousands of cases, even in Topeka, where a tenant is perfectly satisfied living in really what most people would call deplorable conditions, because they know that they can't get anything else, anything better, maybe for a variety of reasons. It could be a criminal record or a really bad rental history, or, you know, for financial reasons. But I just want to say my opinion. I just think that's a really treacherous path to go down, is involuntary interior inspections. I think that I put Teresa Baker on the spot. Anybody can call HCCI. They do a wonderful job. If a person would feel threatened that their landlord was going to retaliate, they have a real effective method of maybe reaching out to that landlord and letting them know that that's a violation of the law to do that. So anyway, I guess that's my comments.
Thank you. I think this array of, in the presentation and the comments, reflects the candor that everybody has had so far about what the issues are, what the solutions might or might not be. We've needed that, because what we want is a successful, well-integrated system when we get done. So thank you, everybody, for your contributions prior. Again, Karen has 10 more engagements. Many of you will be involved in one or more of those, and we appreciate that as well. Just to wrap up, a reminder that there is a public meet and greet session tomorrow evening at the Celtic Fox. Anybody can come and get a chance to spend time one-on-one with Karen. We saw that some of the promotion about it said, or the council members will be there too to talk about the change of culture. We will be, and so we'll be available as well if people want to visit. Just to wrap up this meeting today then, want to just hop through quickly what the status is of some of the other moving parts of this initiative. The vegetation ordinance has been drafted by legal, has been considered by this committee once already, and we'll be watching for that, likely to see it back this fall. We're going to get through this growing season and kind of watch what we thought would work. The mowing contract, on the action steps, we've looked at developing a low-cost fixed-rate mowing program, so there's absolutely a resource for anybody who has a little money and can't mow or hasn't mowed yet. And the property or the contracts and procurement staff from the city handled that RFP. It has closed. We will be looking at that this week to see if that mowing contract to one or more neighborhood-based contractors can be executed by the end of this month, so watch for news about that. Volunteer mowing recruiting will start as soon as we know we've got the mowing contracts done, so that those, the publicity and education about those will happen concurrently, again, hopefully by the end of the month. And one more piece of that, which Monique Laudet, who's in the back, will manage for us, is when that publicity goes out, if people need some help with mowing, that was our action priority for this summer, there will be a phone number where people can call and get referred either to mowing resources or to volunteer resources. So those pieces are all underway. Related to that though, just for those who are watching, this is year 1 of 5, with mowing being the action priority for this year. We certainly want the word out that we are encouraging all residents to come up with a plan for regular mowing and trimming for each property for which they are responsible. And also look around their blocks or their networks to see if there's anyone who needs help that they can help. Our goal with our action side of this initiative is that the community looks good, feels good, and is taking care of itself, again, as we talked about earlier, without city intervention at all. With that, this engagement was supposed to happen last month, so we had a tentative next meeting for this committee penciled for later this month. I am not expecting us to meet again this month, and again, with all of the policy and procedure work that is underway and the action steps that we're going to be pushing out over the summer, expect this committee will probably not meet again until August or September. Questions about that? Any other issues or comments? Nothing online? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.